most important role of a drummer is to keep good, steady time. I started when I was 9, and from that point until I was 18, I did a lot of studying, but I gave very little thought to developing my time. At 18, I went to a Stan Kenton camp, a clinic where Peter Erskine was the teacher, and his emphasis was on developing time. So when I left that clinic, I really had an insight into what it was that was needed of me to become a real good professional player. Because I was thinking about it, I was actually starting to develop much better time. Other musicians would pick up upon that and want to play because they could relax and they could feel comfortable knowing that, you know, here's a drummer that's really focused on number one priority, keeping the beat steady.
When playing or talking about straight eighth note music, that is like funk or pop kind of stuff, I still consider the quarter note the most important part of the beat. But it's the subdivisions that make the music sound the way that it does. And I have to be aware of the smallest common denominator of those subdivisions to have a strong internal reference point that I can hook everything up to. For example, when I play this kind of a groove, it's what most people would consider an eighth note groove. But what I'm singing to myself are 16th notes. Why? Well, because the bass drum is playing 16th notes, and my smallest common denominator being the 16th note, if I'm singing that, then whenever I play the bass drum or add that rhythm anywhere, a 16th note rhythm, I'm not flying it in out of the blue. I've got a reference point, and it's like a clock, a wheel that's in motion, and I can latch onto it, and everything will fall right where I'm going to hope it will.
To me, the word groove means conveying a pulse. Okay, and a pulse is something that is felt so that people can dance to it and feel where the time of the music is. Okay, and so to me, the pulse is usually the quarter note. So what I try to do when I play any type of a groove, we're going to talk about straight eighth music now, like rock or, you know, pop style of music, straight eighth. To convey the quarter note and the pulse, I'm going to talk about the hi-hat for a second. I'm going to start with that because this instrument, this voice of the instrument, can really convey a groove all by itself, and it should be paid attention to. So I got to have a couple of little rules for the hi-hat. Basically, any note that is an accent is played with the shoulder of the stick on the side of the hi-hat. Any note that's not an accent is played with the tip on top of the hi-hat. Okay, so taking that and starting with just an eighth note pulse. To convey the quarter note, we want to accent the quarter note, but not the offbeat eighth notes. So if we're at this tempo and we have eighth notes, it would sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, now notice the motion. This is a very simple thing to do. If you just play the quarter note with the shoulder and the offbeat with the tip, all I do is raise my whole wrist, my whole arm, bend the wrist, and drop the stick in time on the offbeat eighth note. So I'm really concentrating and focusing on the quarter note and that pulse. So just lift it and drop it. That way it sort of becomes like one motion instead of thinking every beat or, you know, so the sound characteristic of the hi-hat is what's conveying this pulse and this groove.
So by being aware and singing those subdivisions to myself, I can play a real steady and solid beat from the get-go. But when I play these subdivisions, for example, eighth notes on the hi-hat, just like when I'm playing a jazz ride cymbal pattern, the quarter note arm motion really doesn't change. Those are quarter notes. Now I'll play eighth notes. Now, I could play very strict, even eighth notes if I had to. But somehow I prefer the other way. It has a lilt to it, a little bit of a swing, and maybe that's why I'm not called to do more pop record dates, but that's okay. I like it like that.
Once you establish the beat, I want you to focus on keeping solid time. The drummer in the band has to focus on this the most because he holds the band together. But the other musicians are equally responsible for time. You can't force 5 musicians to play together if they don't want to play in time. Now, what I do to practice my time is I work with a drum machine and a metronome. I want you to do the same. Spend some time playing with a drum machine or a metronome and make sure that you play all your tempos steady. This will be an exercise and it will show you where you speed up and slow down. I'm going to play a drum machine and listen to him through my headphones.
If I could think in time, then it's just a physical problem of getting myself to play in time. So the first thing that I would do, one of the methods that I used was to turn on a metronome, click track, whatever, drum machine, and to count along in time and actually try to develop a good feel just internally. By doing it internally, actually the easiest step to make it external wasn't the drums for me, but was just the voice. So that's why I started counting. I went from listening to the metronome, trying to hear and think clearly in time, and then state it with my voice. One E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 So this really worked for me. Any style of music that I was working on, say if it was a jazz tune, I would count and try to get it to swing. Maybe sing the bass line or sing the melody along with the counting. But I really realized is if I focused on internally concentrating on the beat, then externally my playing would start to fall into place and feel very comfortable.
It's partly the drummer's role, right, to keep the time and to establish a certain confident time feel. And the way that I've found that I can build that and practice it and get a confidence feeling across is, number one, every time you try to practice a time type of thing where you're going to be playing in time, you should use some sort of a click track, some sort of a metronome that you can hear. Okay, it's very important that you can hear it. Something that can be used with headphones or loudspeakers. The idea basically for playing in time is to get it inside of your body first before you try to get it out of your body. All right? What I try to do is every time I hear a click or if I hear somebody counting off a tune, the first thing I start doing is counting the subdivisions or singing the subdivisions, really, because I don't mean counting 1 E and a 2 E and or anything like that. Basically singing like the fastest subdivision that makes sense for the groove. And it generally will be 16th notes. Okay, say if we're at a tempo like that, the minute I hear that, the first thing I start doing is going try to start singing something like the groove is going to sound that you're going to play. Basically, so like I said, once it's inside of you, then it's very easy, or it's easier anyway, to get it outside because you've got it, it's internal. So what we're trying to build here is an internal clock, something that's inside that really never leaves, okay?
You need to be able to practice everything with a drum machine, but eventually you need to be able to do it without a drum machine or a metronome. These things can become crutches. For 2 years I practiced with a drum machine and worked on my time, and it became very steady. But whenever I played without a drum machine, I felt helpless. So I want you to practice without a drum machine. I want you to be your own drum machine. I want you to hear that click in your head.
When I first started playing with Journey, one of the most difficult challenges that I was faced with was trying to play the very, very slow tempos and the ballads that the band did. And I came up with a method of working on my meter. So when I played the fills, when I played the time, the subdivision of the beat was even. In those slow tempos, it was very easy to get a little bit off, and especially when playing a fill, to come out and maybe a little bit ahead or a little bit behind. And in my opinion, the most important note of a fill is actually the last note, where you come out. If it doesn't come out quite in time, then the whole fill was sort of a waste of time. The idea is to set up a downbeat or an accent. So I developed this method of playing a very slow samba with my bass drum and then just practicing simple stuff on top of it. Quarter notes, eighth notes on the beat, or quarter notes or eighth notes off the beat. And I first started just on my snare drum, then started moving around to the toms and the cymbals. And the end result was I felt much more comfortable with the slow tempos and had a lot more freedom to play without being so concerned with the accuracy. Because through practice, I started to develop a comfortable feel with the slower tempo. So here I'll turn on this and give you a little example of this. eventually, by setting up this pattern with the bass drum and practicing the just the simple fills on top, I started to develop a feel for how much room was needed to be left in between each note in order to give them their full value.
A real good exercise to practice, all right, is just breaking up 16th notes between the snare drum, the bass drum, and the hi-hat, and just playing real dynamic curves at a very slow tempo, all right, so that you can really practice getting subdivisions and practice getting single strokes between the limbs and the instruments to sound like one continuous flow, okay? So it sort of sounds like this. One, two, three, four. Okay, now once you get that type of thing to where it's comfortable, the next step in this little exercise is to start adding more subdivisions faster, like 30-second notes, okay, and just kind of fit those in and try to really nail it with the click, okay? And notice with the click there's an offbeat eighth note that's a shaker sound, all right? The more subdivisions that you have when you're playing with a click, the better it is for you because you'll be able to lock in more, all right? So here's with more subdivisions. 2, 3, 4.
The key to any beat's success is being able to play it simply and to play it well. Now, the first time that you meet any piece of music, whether in a recording session situation or playing with a band for the first time or playing just a piece of music with a band that you're already in, you want to shake music's hand, look it right in the eye and say, "How are you?" and then wait for a reply. I think if you add too much of yourself to it the first time through, you're really not getting a chance to hear what it is you got to do. For example, you go into a studio and you got a piece of music in front of you and it says funk beat. And I'm talking about a general kind of recording situation, some kind of commercial thing. I don't think it'd be a good idea to approach it like this. 1, 2, 3. So on and so forth. You got to listen and hear what's going on. I listen to the bass player first. The bass player's pattern will usually guide your hands and feet as to what to play. And when in doubt, make it simple, find out what's going on. Here's the way you'd want to try to approach a jingle session. If it's 4/4 and it says funk, then do this. 1, 2, 3.
A lot of times when you hear a song on the radio, you probably think, oh, I can play that beat. That's really basic. That's really simple. But what you don't probably realize is that the beat you're hearing on that song is the end result of possibly hours, days, weeks, and months of working on that music. So, for example, in a song called Jack and Diane, I played this very basic beat when we started rehearsing. But the end result was a lot different than what I just played you. We tried many, many different things, and this is what we eventually came up with. Another example that's just like this is we did a song called Crumbling Down. And I first played a beat something like this. Well, I'd played that beat many, many times, and I was trying to look for something a little bit more unique. So I got inspired by the guitar part that John was playing on the acoustic guitar. And instead of playing the eighth note figure that I usually play on the hi-hat, I put it in my right foot. So it went something like this.
I think it's a good thing to have enough confidence in yourself to play simply. You know, you don't have to show off. Play something simple and well, and you prepare the music for greater things to come. And you have some place to go. You know, something that is complex and busy and amazing all the time, it's kind of like bad wallpaper after a while. So, start simple. The music will start to tell you the things that you can do. For example,
what you need to try and do is really intend everything that you're going to play. Just don't go for something, you know, and you're playing a certain groove. Interesting story that happened to me. I used to tape record myself, and still do, as much as possible, all the time on gigs that I would do. And at the time when I was playing, I would be doing something, you know, a certain groove, and while I was doing it, I thought it was like the hippest thing and the greatest thing. I thought everything was really happening. And I'd listen back to it on a cassette, and it just sounded very rushed and like nothing the way that I perceived it when I was playing. So I started to get into the habit of trying to actually listen to myself while I was playing as if I was listening to myself from a tape recorder. Actually thinking about removing yourself from the drum set and listening to the whole band as a general mix, you know, so that you can really hear how you fit into the rest of the music. And it's a mental objective, you know, it's a mental thing that you have to really try and intend to do. And it's hard to do.
I want you to focus now on making that beat groove. This is the most important part of drumming because you are the spirit, you are the soul and the emotion in the band. You're the guy that can make the other players play great. You're the guy that can make the audience enjoy themselves, tap their feet or dance to a song. You are literally the soul of the band. I would rather listen to a drummer with no technique and lots of soul than to listen to a drummer with a lot of technique and no soul. And I didn't understand this at first, but until I was recording a song with John in the studio called Hurt So Good. I really wanted to play something technically great, but the song just didn't call for that. And when I listened to the playback, I realized that what I really dug about the song was the simplicity of the beat, and what I heard was just a lot of feeling, a lot of soul, and a lot of spirit. And that's when I was convinced. So what I want you to do is practice at home, playing a beat, either with a record or sing a melody, and just with no hot licks, no flash, just constantly focus on playing the beat and making it feel real good.
We know that rhythm is the essence of drumming, but it's important to think melodically and harmonically, too. In this solo, inspired by the music of New Orleans, I establish a groove on the kit while playing the melody on the snare drum.
The way I approach playing a rock feel is what I would call building from the bottom up. And this is something that I came to realize through my work with Journey. Is when I first started playing in the group, coming from more of a jazz background, I tended to be top-heavy, is how I would describe it. Like, especially in the recording studio, I'd noticed that the engineers would push up my bass drum level a little bit, take down my overhead and hi-hat level a little bit in order to get the proper feel. So I started thinking, well, you know, I should do that in my playing. I shouldn't rely on the engineer to make those adjustments for me. So let me play you what it is that I'm talking about. And I'll exaggerate at first and play maybe what it was that I sounded like before, and then show you what it is that I started to develop and change my approach, my conception of playing rock. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then after trying to get more of that bottom heavy feeling, it sounded more like this. 1, 2, 3, 4.
The next example is going to be basically playing with a sequence type of thing. And I'm going to stretch a little bit out from the just playing time and playing everything. This type of practice thing, like I said before, you should always practice with a click. There's two ways that I like to practice with a click track, and one of them is the perfection way, to really try and get everything perfect. Every little note that you play, every fill, everything in the groove has to be right, spot on. That's the one way. The second way is to purposely practice playing loose, okay? Loose phrasings around the bar lines, phrasing over bar lines, and just trying to play things a little bit looser, you know, so that you can build that internal clock. And when it's not there, you
The beat itself is like the cake, and you want to add things to it, but you don't want to mess up that foundation. So I'm going to play along with this tape, and I'm going to add creative ideas to it.